Underscore is a project that you initiated. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what Underscore Orchestra is and how, what the vision of that is from your perspective? Like, what made you want to do what you want to do in the way you did it?
So it came about actually in 2021. I started playing. I sort of had my first sort of professional trumpet gig playing with the Chineke Orchestra, which is Europe's first majority black and ethnically diverse orchestra.
Mm.
Um, and well, I remember I always tell this story when I talk about Chineke, but before I got to the first rehearsal, I and as a sort of I must have been sort of 20 at the time. As a 20-year-old student, I was just excited for someone to say, please come and play your trumpet, we will pay you money. And for me,
Yeah.
that's all I needed to be sold. So I went down to London and sat in the first rehearsal, and it was such a transformative experience because I'd never, I'd been playing since I was 8 years old in all sorts of county orchestras and everything. And it was the first time I'd ever played in a group where I wasn't the only one or maybe one of two other musicians of color. And it was, the first time where nearly everyone in the room looked like me and sort of had similar life experiences to me. And even though, that hadn't even been a consideration in taking on the job at the time, it
Mm.
became the sort of leading reason as to why I'd always go back there whenever I was asked. Just because I always say that it was something that I really needed, but didn't know I needed it until it happened. Um, and then the first concert I did with Chineke, having an audience that was also incredibly diverse as well, was again a really fantastic experience. But I came back from my sort of first concerts with Chineke thinking there must be so many amateur musicians who they don't want to play as if it's their profession. They sort of want to do a go to one rehearsal a week and do a concert every few months and that sort of thing, who would be would benefit equally and deserve to have the same experience that I had, being amongst such a diverse group of people. So that was my original, oh, and it still is. That was my main sort of drive for wanting to start Underscore, is that I wanted to start an amateur orchestra that its heart was diversity and ethnic diversity. And so the play, not only the players but also the music that we were playing itself. So the sort of unique thing about Underscore is not only are our performers mainly from a global majority background, um, the repertoire we play is also completely taken from composers and artists from sort of the ethnic global majority, but instead of it being classical music, we focus mainly on popular music or film scores from the countries that the membership of the orchestra represents itself. So that ranges from Bollywood soundtracks to sort of reggae and even some like Hollywood blockbusters, like the music from Black Panther, for example. So we play all sorts, but try and make it so that whoever comes, regardless of whether they've listened to any classical music or not, that at least something in that program they will have definitely heard before, but just not in an orchestral setting.
Mm.
Um, which I think just really decreases the barrier to entry for people who have sort of never felt any connection to an orchestra, because it's really daunting going to your first orchestra concert and not only it looking very sort of strange and sort of pomp and circumstancy, but also then not really knowing much of the music on the program or not sort of understanding it. Whereas I think, you know, if you're going to listen to an orchestra play something that you already know really well, but they're going to sort of take it into a sort of new realm in a sort of orchestral fashion, then that is sort of a really nice sort of path to then leading you down, making your own decisions about what orchestral music you like. And it also then means you've always got like an orchestra that you can feel safe with, not only just as a player, but also as an audience member. You know that there's underscore will always sort of be there as something for you to enjoy, and you sort of know that you're going to feel you know that you're going to have a connection with it.
One thing that you've been talking about sort of like brings the word identity very much into my mind, and
Mm.
you've been active in kind of working on a recent kind of research project with the Birmingham Conservatoire University, with the Arts Council, the Fair and Inclusive, what was inspired by the Fair and Inclusive Classical Music Report, which is where we met on that steering
Mhm.
group. And then later, kind of, we've been talking about, so we were on a joint panel, weren't we, up at the Music Mark conference in Southampton in November 2023, with the theme of kind of decolonizing the music curriculum. So speaking about that, and sort of from what you're saying as well, that idea of identity and seeing you're a safe place within an environment, both it sounds like when you first felt that when you performed with Chineke, but then equally then what you want to give for audiences, and in the way of accessibility as well. So I'd just be really interested in your perspectives on like the ways that you feel that the sector is right now, and how we can create some of those spaces where people can identify with either being a musician within that, or being an audience member or a participant in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sector's definitely at a point of realization at the moment. I think it accepts that things need to change, and that the change is going to be big, and it's not going to be something that happens overnight or be sort of, you know, really easy to do quickly. And I think, and actually, I that was something we all learned as youth ambassadors at the CBSO, was that an orchestra like that is always battling with finding the balance between playing and performing in a way that attracts their current audience members, and also trying to find a way of bringing in a new, often more sort of diverse, maybe even sort of a younger audience that will, what do we do to bring them in without also um, sending away our sort of current audience. And I think that's always, we when I was a youth ambassador, that was always the biggest problem, was if we put this concert on with all these pieces that people have probably never heard before, yes, it might get in a younger audience or a more diverse audience, but are we then selling something that is sort of a lie, because you're not going to be able to come to another CBSO concert that year that is anything close to what we've put on, because the other ones are sort of more in line with their sort of current audienceship. And I actually think in the sort of last few months, the CBSO especially have completely sort of changed that look on things, and are now have a sort of much more holistic approach to bringing in a sort of new audience. But I think in terms of practical things, especially with underscore, practical things that I tried to do, some of the approaches that I took with underscore to try and sort of decrease the sort of perceived barriers to entry that I sort of, again, well, that I perceive that potential audience members might have, was, so first of all, I looked at the venue itself. I remember sort of going to my first orchestral gig it was in the Royal Albert Hall actually, so huge venue, with about at least sort of 5,000 people in there, but feeling so out of place because out of that many people, I was sort of one of two people of color watching this concert, and at first you don't notice, and then you sort of look around and think, oh, this place is huge, but where's everyone else, sort of thing. Surely there should be
Yeah.
more. Statistically, there should be more of us in here. So, I knew that there were definitely going to be people who had maybe not been in that situation before, but have heard or have sort of been told that that's sort of a reason that they're not welcome in those spaces.
Mm.
So instead of our first concert being in a concert hall or a sort of specifically a sort of a theatre venue or something, we performed in a sort of conference space at the Midlands Arts Centre. And I specifically wanted, instead of having stalls and rows of chairs, we had sort of people around tables, and there was no sort of higher stage, so you were on the same level as the orchestra. And I really wanted to try and make it feel as like they were as in the performance as we were playing. And even other things that sort of decreased that like invisible curtain between the performers and the audience was after each piece I would get someone from the orchestra come to just talk a bit about their journey and
Mm.
sort of their experiences, so that the audience felt like they knew who they were listening to as more than just musicians but as sort of people. And then sort of the main thing was just the repertoire we chose. I tried to pick a repertoire that sort of spanned sort of across the globe. And my aim was to have at least sort of two people for each piece we play, sort of be like, oh, I know this one, or I love this is my favorite song, or something like that. And I think that happened. I mean, I was conducting, so a lot of the time my back was facing them, but I think that happened from what I hear from the other musicians. But yeah, so they were sort of some of the practical steps that I took to try and sort of tackle that issue.